all are doing well. Give me a thumbs up if you can hear. All right, perfect. Good to have so many people here with us this morning. Also, very wonderful to have Dan Forrest with us this morning, sharing. Just as a reminder, as we get started, make sure that your computer is on mute unless you have a question for Dan. If you don't know Dan Forrest holds a doctorate in composition from the University of Kansas. And he is also a fellow of Melodious Accord, where he worked with Alice Parker. Maybe more importantly for us, he is artist in residence at Mitchell Road Presbyterian Church in Greenville, South Carolina, where he lives. And I think I think most of you would agree with me on this, that we just love doing Dan's music because it really speaks to our congregations and to our choirs as well. So Dan Forrest, thank you so much for being here this morning. I pass the torch over to you, sir.
Thank you. I'm so glad to be here with you all. It's such a can you all hear me okay? All good? All right. It's such an amazing thing to be with a group of choir directors these days, right? I mean, it's something that we took for granted a little bit before. But now when I see a group of choral directors, it feels like we have this sort of shared trauma that we've been through. And it just feels like you all are so special and in a way that we just didn't think about before. And it's such a privilege to be with a group of these people that did this thing and came through this thing that we've been through. I hope I'm not getting ahead of myself speaking past tense, but there's just so much that we've shared and been through over the last couple of years that, like, I just sort of want to applaud when I see you all. Like, thank you for doing what you're doing and for surviving however you survived with whatever kind of choir you have. Just some pretty crazy stuff that none of us ever saw coming in the choir world or in the composing world or the publishing world or any of those things. So whatever all you've had to do over the last 2 years, thank you for the way that you've tried to keep music alive in whatever way that you could. And thank you for the way that I'm sure you've just shepherded and ministered to your choir members and to your people. Choir is a group of people who need shepherding as well, not just a bunch of robots who make music, you know. And so thank you for what you've done for your people and for your music making. I am going to share just a few of my most recent pieces with you very briefly here at the beginning, and then for the rest of the time we'll just talk. So I'll talk at you for not very long, and then you can talk at me and we'll have a good conversation about whatever you would like to discuss. So if you have things, just jot them down, or you could even put them in the chat, and we'll try to get to those very soon. Let me share a screen here. I can get this opened up. Oh, sorry, hold on. I have this very high resolution screen, which is great, but if I share it to you all, then it comes across really tiny, and that's no good. So let me get the size right here. Apologies. There we go. Well, it's still not working quite right here. I'm not sure if I shared what I wanted to, and I don't have a way of seeing what I'm sharing.
We're looking at the breath of life.
Yeah. Is it really tiny on your screen?
It's pretty good size.
Yeah, okay. Is it just that window or is it the whole desktop?
It's that window on the desktop.
Yeah, okay. I was trying to share just that window. We'll just leave it alone. It's all right. Okay, so 2 places that I want you to be aware of, that I just share when I get a chance to choral directors, are my website, which looks like this. It's got that slideshow running at the opening. And then, of course, the Beckenhorst Press website, where I either publish or distribute all of my music. Those are the 2 places that I want you most to be aware of. So all of my music is always listed at danforrest.com under music catalog here, under choral, complete list. And I always have the newest things up at the top. So these are a few of the pieces that I'll just mention to you today briefly up here at the top. I do have cool options over on the right here to sort by publisher and by categories, by voicing, by instrumentation, and then eventually there's even tags for Christmas and communion and scripture and wedding and whatever all you might be looking for. So hopefully those are helpful resources for you. Honestly, when somebody writes me and says, Dan, what do you have for Easter with a string quartet? I don't have a great memory for that kind of thing. So I literally just hop on my own website and click Easter and string quartet, and you can do the exact same thing. So if that's helpful for you, there you go. The other place I want you to be aware of is the Beckenhorst website, which is just beckenhorstpress.com. Looks like this. At Beckenhorst, we do sell almost all of our products, both in print and in digital. And our website is the only place you can get them digitally. So I just share that news, that bit of info, whenever I get a chance. So for each of these, like current new pieces, you see a regular version and then one that has the little digital download banner. If you prefer them digitally, there you go. It'll deliver a PDF to you. Of course, we ask you to pay for each copy that you're going to make or each digital file that's going to be shared and used. That helps us stay in business, of course. But if you want digital copies, the Beckenhorst website is the only place to get it. What that does for us is eliminates the middleman. And then we're able to pay our composers a 30% royalty on those digital download versions instead of 10%. So in an attempt to be an artist first, a composer first kind of publisher, that enables us to triple the royalties for our composers. So if that's of interest to you and you would like to purchase digitally, now you know. And you know that you're helping a composer by tripling their revenue on that piece, if you're into that. That applies to orchestrations, ancillary parts and a string quartet version or whatever. All those download versions benefit the composers more. I still firmly believe in paper, and a vast majority of people do still buy paper. And if you're a paper person, we got you covered there too. Then you can buy that from here or for wherever you typically make your purchases. That's all good. With Easter coming up, I want to make sure that you are aware of Crown Hymn. This is a new setting of mine that kind of mixes a bit of Beethoven's 9, Hymn to Joy, with the hymn that you know, in a way that works for Easter or can work for general worship as well. It's pretty bold and dramatic. I'll play just a little bit of the opening here. I don't want to waste your time by doing something you could do on your own, but just a little taste so you know kind of what's happening. And I didn't share sound, but I think you'll be able to hear this. Actually, maybe I can share sound from over here. All right, here we go. Pretty dramatic. Sets up a lot of anticipation. Let's do it. Sense of awakening happening here. All right, so that's, you can still all hear me, correct? All right, so that's one stanza out of 4. a few more coming there, some modulations and some gradual growth that builds, and more Beethoven and more crowns. Triumph over the grave is a very strong moment there that makes it work well for Easter. And then for the last stanza, I actually went into compound meter the same way that Beethoven's 9 does. So you have all those groupings of 3 undergirding the hymn tune that comes through as well. So if that's useful for you for Easter coming up, maybe you've already got everything planned, just use it for general worship sometime. That may be of interest.
While you're talking about it,
yeah,
I just wanted to say, I love when the orchestral chimes come in.
no, so you know,
it's really majestic. I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a pianist who turned into a choral guy who did a doctorate with a wind band composer. So I love pulling all those things together and mixing in some organ too, as you heard there. I love just kind of all available resources, but yet being as efficient as I can, and offering smaller options too. So I love all those colors. Thanks for the shout out for the chimes. This is the Day is another one of my newest pieces from Beckenhorst. So this is a setting of Psalm 118. If you dig in a bit, as probably a lot of you do theologically, Psalm 118, the day the Lord has made, is the day of resurrection. So technically, this is kind of an Easter piece. You could potentially open a service or have a little, you could use this in a variety of ways liturgically. But the text is, this is the day the Lord has made, we'll rejoice and be glad in it. I actually wrote this for a choral tour of Israel that was supposed to happen last year and now is hopefully happening this year. So there's also a sense of taking this psalm that was written in the Holy Land by a Hebrew poet and returning those words to the land where they were first written for me. I've never been to the Holy Land and I'm super looking forward to going. Hopefully that all works out. And so this is my way of doing something a little bit Hebrew to take back to that place. It's not a big overpowering kind of thing like Crown Hymn was. It's much more gentle and almost just kind of thoughtful. So here's just a little bit of that. I'm picturing like a brand new morning, waking up in Israel. That's the main theme, right? It develops from there, as you might expect. So that might be useful for Easter or just for kind of a general call to worship or a reflective moment in a variety of ways as we rejoice in what God has given us on the day of resurrection, or just the grace of any new day that's given to us. 3 more that I'll just mention quickly. I won't bother playing for you. This is Praise to the Lord the Almighty. This was commissioned by Duke Chapel before the pandemic. I wrote it for them during the pandemic and they premiered it virtually. There's a video on this page if you find it on the Beckenhorst website or on my website as well. The video is embedded there. Really cool virtual choir video they did. If you want to do a virtual choir video, you might as well do it in a place like Duke Chapel, yeah? Just gorgeous looking and gorgeous sounding. I love writing for that space. This is the second time I've been privileged to do so. And man, I will collaborate with them anytime they'd like. So this is a very big and joyous and festival kind of setting of Lobedin Herren. I also, since I'm focusing so much on like these really big, mostly festival hymn setting type things, let me just cover the opposite end of the spectrum as well. So Small But Mighty is a collection of SAB transcriptions that I did just before the pandemic. I wrote these in like late 2019, and we published them in early 2020, if I remember correctly. It was out just before the pandemic. And then when everybody started switching to small numbers and I don't have enough men and all that kind of thing, everybody presumed that I wrote this in response to the pandemic. I was like, no, providentially, this just happened right before it, but here it is if it's helpful. So this is 8 of probably my better known anthems. They're listed here, that are transcribed for SAB. So on a Sunday, maybe in the summer, if your men's section is smaller, your choir is smaller in general, or if you're still emerging from COVID and trying to get people to come back. At my church, we often have 60, 65 in the choir. It's fantastic. But during pandemic and even coming out of it still, sometimes it's just not that strong. And so we've used several of these. The only tricky thing is if you've sung the original and like your basses know their original bass part, and then you ask them to sing this new like combined men's part, it might be a little different, but it's always easier. So you shouldn't get complaints from them. It's easier to sing. So if that's useful for you, those are available as a collection. They're also available individually, and they're listed here on the Small But Mighty page on the Beckenhurst website. You can also go over to the physical product as well, and they're listed there as well. So either way, these are available if you don't plan to use all 8. And for people that just said, oh, I just want those 2, do I have to buy the whole book? They are available digitally. We don't print them individually, but if you'd like to buy them digitally, then you can just click on the one that you like and just buy that one like as an individual digital octavo that you can use. The piano parts on those are slightly simplified from the original as well, if you have a limited accompanist situation. However, the original accompaniments work. If you have a really good accompanist who's like, come on, I want to do the real thing, you can go right ahead and do that. That's all compatible. And if you have like a full orchestra, or you have the string quartet parts from the original SATB or something, all of that is compatible. Nothing is ever like, no, you can't use those together. Everything fits together with everything. So if you have some previous version that you want to accompany it with, you go right ahead, it'll work fine. Just gives you lots of options, hopefully. And if you have no accompanist at all, I actually recorded accompaniment tracks for this as well. So if you want me to accompany, you can just buy the MP3 and there you go. I'll be glad to come join you virtually that way. Real quickly, one last thing. I have started self-publishing my concert music that used to be published with Hinshaw. I keep that under my own umbrella now, and that's all distributed at the Beckenhurst Press website. The most recent publication in that series is Light Beyond Shadow here. Just a gorgeous text that a choir commissioned me to set. Love it when a choir sends me just a text that's dying to sing for me. It's a very happy moment when that happens. I've altered this a little bit to be usable in as many situations as possible, but the idea of light beyond shadow, joy beyond tears, love that is greater when darkest our fears, deeper the peace when the storm is around, nearer the hope to the lost who is found. That's been really useful in a lot of situations coming out of the pandemic. A lot of choirs sang this for Advent because of the themes of light and shadow, but it actually works anytime during the year as a message of comfort and consolation and hope. So you may want to check that out as well. My church, we did that as part of our Christmas program, focusing on the light of the incarnation shining. But you, like I say, you can use it wherever you would like. My very next publication that I'm halfway through recording right now, we just recorded vocals last week, is a setting of Ubi Caritas. Like every composer has to set Ubi Caritas sometime in their career, right? So I finally did mine, and I tried to find a little different angle than what else has already been out there. So it sticks closer to the original chant, but just adds a lot of other counter melody and polyphony around the original chant to hopefully make it sound 21st century. So you may want to be on the lookout for that later this spring, if Latin is something that your choir is into. All right, that's kind of what's new from here. And I will be glad to stop monologuing at you and have a little better discussion.
Let me mention one thing, Dan, and that is, in addition to your choral works, you do have some duet and solo arrangements. I use one of your solo books that has a lot of those same arrangements that you showed in the SAB. And also, of course, if y'all don't know the arrangement of Shalom that Dan did, you should look that up and listen to that. That's beautiful as well. And the two solo books, or the solo book, it's in two different voicings, I believe. Isn't that correct?
There's a book of only my anthems that is in 3 different voicings: low, medium, and high. And then during the pandemic, Craig Courtney and I combined, and we each contributed 5 more anthems that were transcribed. So it's 5 of his, either 4 or 5 of his and 4 or 5 of mine. And that's also available low, medium, and high as well. Yeah. Shalom is not in any of those collections. It's just available on its own as a vocal duet, I think, right?
Mm-hmm.
I think is what it is.
Yeah, but available for digital download, so you can get it quickly. In case you need it before March 2nd, any of you Ash Wednesday people, just FYI. All right, so as we open up into this question and answer time, Dan is free to field your questions. If any of you have questions as one's going on, feel free to type it into the chat box and we'll hear from Dan Forrest. To get us started, I would say, I heard you say one time talking about Beckenhorst and how y'all were redeveloping the website. I would say that the website at Beckenhorst has become a lot more user-friendly. Have you noticed more digital downloads from individuals as obviously as the pandemic started, but do you see y'all writing, publishing more actual paper music or more digital stuff in the future?
Yeah, we're going to stay open to wherever people want to go on that front. We make everything available digitally that we can, but I don't think paper is going to disappear anytime soon. There's a lot of advantages to that. So we'll just keep both options open. There is a marked increase in digital sales, which is great for our composers. I mean, at a time when much fewer people are buying choral music, the ones that have bought a lot more digitally, which just puts more revenue back to our composers, which is one of my biggest passions, in case you can't tell. And obviously a conflict of interest as well, admittedly, full disclosure. But yeah, in terms of keeping the fires burning for those people and keeping them interested in doing what we do, I love seeing that happen. Direct sales through our website, I think, are they're approaching a quarter of our overall sales now, whereas it's not too many years back when it was in the very low single digits. And a big part of that is just having the digital available on our site.
Dan, this is Doug Haney. I'll jump in here with a question. So many great pieces, and we could probably all play the game of name your top 5 Dan Forrest pieces, that sort of thing. I'm going to ask you about how firm a foundation. And I just love the setting of that text. I've always loved that hymn text. And but for me, your setting of it is so interesting. It is symphonic to my ear in a short form. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what intrigues me about your music generally, is there's a different voice, a different sense of the music developing. It's certainly, I mean, you may occasionally use an ABA form, but I think my singers are much more interested in meaty things where there's a sense of the music evolving and developing and going somewhere. The music takes them on a journey. So there's a question in there somewhere, and I think I think the question is,
I can ramble about that stuff all day long, man.
And this may be off in the weeds too much, but I'm fascinated with the architecture. Does the architecture evolve in the compositional process for you? Is it sort of fully formed and then you map in the details a little bit like Ravel did? Or I'll let you answer that any way you want to. I'm just interested to hear you talk about it.
Yeah, you push the button and now the door's open. It's all going to come out. Yeah. Oh man, you're talking about some of my very favorite things here. When I run composer workshops, I mean, the spectrum of what you just talked about is at least half a day's worth of condensed discussion. Like, oh, there's so much about form. Yeah. Development is one of my highest compositional ideals. I don't want my music to feel like I just kind of scavenged around and glued a bunch of things together and tried to create this Frankenstein monster out of them. I want it to feel, I mean, I'm probably a Baroque guy at heart. I love the idea of taking one little cell and then seeing how much I can spin out of that, and continuously spinning it out. Fortune and I love the chorale prelude model, where here's this hymn tune, but now let me create this new material that carries it on its back. And in the case of Bach, sometimes this new material is way more interesting than the hymn tune that it's carrying on its back, you know, and people love it. And if you ask them to sing Jesu, Joy of Man's Desiring, they don't sing the chorale. They sing what Bach wrote to accompany it, you know, because it's just so compelling. I love all those concepts. Those all come together for me in terms of just compositional unity and cohesiveness of idea. And yet, you know, there's a tricky balance between cohesiveness and just boring people to death. The reason that minimalism sometimes gets a bad rap from people is just because it's so terribly obnoxiously unified, you know? Or in a sense, because it maybe doesn't develop as quickly as we would like. The sense of development is so slow motion that we lose track of it. And it doesn't feel like development, it just feels like repetition. So there's a lot of things in play there to try to keep right. You did ask too about my process. For me, I think of the architect side of being a composer as the form and the architecture, to use your word, and I think of the builder side as all the little details that we're going to use to create that form. And for me, it's not like the theory textbooks always say, where it always starts with this one tiny little thing that then gradually accumulates and builds. It's like an accumulative view of the compositional process. From a theory standpoint, that works really well if you're going to go analyze something that's very tightly motivically constructed, because then we see the little thing and then we see how it evolves. And okay, that makes really good sense in retrospect, you know, in analysis. But I don't think the creative process has to work that way. Sometimes it does, yes. But for me, I start on either one end or the other. And whenever I get stuck on the one, I switch over to the other. So I might have like this really big, beautiful concept of, oh, this is amazing symphony that I'm going to write. But then sooner or later, I'm going to get stuck on, well, what am I going to build that out of? Like, what materials do I have to actually create this towering structure? I can't just dream up a beautiful castle. I have to actually go find the materials to build it, you know? And then sometimes it starts on the other end where I just have this little idea and I just follow it to see where it goes. My O Come All Ye Faithful was like that. Probably several of you have done that piece. That's that started that way. That's where that began, was just and then I just explored all the possible paths and condensed all the best ones into something that felt like it started here and then just grew the whole way, you know? So for me, the tough part of composing is when I'm either out at the big end or working on the tiny end, and I'm trying to be an architect and a builder at the same time, but can't figure out which one I need to be at the moment, you know? But if each day I make a little progress on the architecture side or a little progress on the builder side, the little details, sooner or later they start coming together. And there's this magnetic pull that happens at a certain point where, oh, I know where this piece goes and this can fit there. And oh, this is going to be a good idea. And oh, if I use this, now the form can, and it's a back and forth, a give and take, almost a dialogue between the builder side of me and the architect side of me. I sound schizophrenic now, I'm not. But those two have to come together at some, and then when they get close, oh man, the composing is so much fun. And that's the moment I live for. If I only had these things, I would quit composing very soon. Like it's no fun. Those are the days that I'm kind of grumpy because I'm trying to pull it all together and it's just not happening. But with patience and courage, sooner or later it comes together, and that sense of development of the little materials is there, and the overall architecture feels right. And then the piece just sets up its own demands. And at that point, I'm at the mercy of the piece. It's not me dictating what the piece should do. it's me listening to the ideas that are there and finding out what needs to happen so that they abide by their own terms and fulfill the expectations they're setting up. And from that point, it gets real easy to see where it needs to go and finish it up. That's the happy part of composing.
That's really fascinating. Thank you so much for taking a deep dive into that.
See, I told you I could ramble about that all day.
We've got a question here in the chat box. Dan, some composers may over-arrange. So what do you tell to those composers? Or do you ever talk to composers and how they arrange and maybe give them helpful hints?
Yeah, I do a very large amount of work in both workshops and mentoring, and then just the Beckenhorst editing process. We edit more heavily than any other publisher I know of. If we accept your piece, we're basically going to have a bit of a composition lesson on it. So it's a lot of work, but we hope that it's for the best, and we hope that we're solving the problems that the composer should handle, so that then your rehearsal is as smooth and efficient as possible, because we've fixed the issues of voice leading and efficiency and balance and structure and divisi and breath, so that hopefully you can be as freed as possible to just make music instead of like doing work that should have been done at the composer's end. I'm curious, Chip, about what you mean by over arrange. And I'm glad you feel like I never do that. But
yeah, I really don't feel like you do. Sometimes you get into a piece and it changes keys and it changes keys and it gets more and more and more. And you feel like about halfway through the piece, you feel like that was enough.
yeah.
But they tend to go on past that. And it's hard for me to put my finger on how I feel about it. I just know when I'm doing a piece, sometimes I feel like that's just over arranged. Keep it simpler. Keep it more to the text and maybe what the original piece was about. I will also say too, this is unrelated. There's usually a point in your music where it just hits me, just deep in my soul somewhere. And we're doing a Hymn of Creation in a couple of weeks. That's one of those pieces.
Cool.
Anyway,
Yeah,
so that's why I feel like some arrangers just seem to tend to over arrange.
Yeah, I get what you're saying there. I think it could be a textual thing sometimes where composers, I encourage composers, and I try in my own work, to set text, not use it. I think there's such a thing as using a text for your own compositional purposes, and it almost just becomes a set of syllables that you can use to put across the musical ideas you wanted, as opposed to really staying sensitive to the meter and the flow of the text, the themes of the text, the emotions and the feel of the text, even the sounds, like the sonic value of the words that are there for the text and how they contribute to meaning and how those all overlap. I think paying attention to all that hopefully helps a composer set text instead of just using it for your own purposes. I also think for me, there's, boy, I don't know how to say this exactly. There's like an arrangement can only bear so much weight. And sometimes people try to pile on more, maybe to use our architecture example, people are trying to tack on more and more things, like more and more stories, when the foundation just can't bear all that, just the nature of what the text is or what the music is in general. And it just feels like too much piled on. So I think you have to stay sensitive to how much weight your ideas can bear, or the length of your piece, or just the sound world. I use that word. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think of sound world as like the musical expectations that a piece sets up on its own. And you have to pay attention to what that music is really wanting to do. And at some point, you're just like slapping on more stuff and tacking it on from the outside instead of letting it emerge from within the music. That's a really nebulous thing to say. But for me, maybe that's what makes you say that I don't over arrange, hopefully. I certainly tack on a lot of stuff, but hopefully I'm being sensitive to what that piece can really bear.
We've got another question here in the chat box that is essentially getting to how do you weigh writing from the heart? Let's see, I want to make sure I'm reading the right one. Yes. While also trying to still accomplish production or publishing needs.
Yeah, I have a Venn diagram for that, the type A personality in me. I try to schedule the creative work that I'm going to do at the locus, the dead center of what my commissioner has asked for and what works well for them, what the market can use so that it works for more than just the commissioner, and then my own voice as well. And that, like, to use your words, writing from the heart. Or so that could be a spiritual thing, it could be an emotional thing, it could be a musical thing, but whatever it is that I bring to the table, I try to write where all three of those come together. So that way my commissioner is pleased and I've fulfilled what they asked of me. I can also then publish it and serve the broader music community and the choral community with that piece instead of just one choir. But hopefully I'm remaining true to who I am and what I believe and what I value musically and ministerially and all those things. Sometimes I will write on two of those and not all three, but two has to include my voice. So it's got to be something that I believe in and something that I can, that's truthful from me musically or spiritually or theologically or whatever. And the commissioner, even if it isn't publishable. Or sometimes this is my voice and I'm going to write this because I think lots of people can use it, even though I don't have a commissioner for it. I'll do those. What I won't do is write a piece of music that only fits in those first two. Like this will work for the commissioner and it'll work for the market, but it's not me, or I don't actually believe this. You know, at that point, I've just become a mercenary, you know, like a gun for hire who just shoots out the notes that you wanted. You know, there's a loss of integrity at that point on any number of fronts. So I try to avoid that situation. I try to only accept commissions that will enable me to write something that I really would like to say from the beginning. That's tricky. I make it sound really objective when I say that, and it's not. It's very subjective. But I try to keep those things in view so that I'm not like being insincere or losing musical integrity.
Tell us about your collaboration with your own church, and particularly some people have gotten lots of good ideas from the live stream that y'all did during COVID.
Yeah, I can't say enough good about my church on so many fronts. I just love being at Mitchell Road. Don't get me started. The people, the leadership, the values, the music making between me, Trevor, and Jared. We just have way more fun than anybody should ever be allowed to have. We have a classical based service and a more modern worship service, and it's all great. We do it all really well. We talk about speaking one language, even though we have two different dialects, it's still the same language. The liturgy is the same, even a lot of the song choices are the same. We take the choir in there and sing in their service sometimes, and people like cheer and stomp and they get so excited about what we're doing with our artsy choral stuff. And we bring in musicians from the other service into our classical service sometimes. It's just a really healthy and thriving kind of thing. And I think that comes through, hopefully even in the live stream, that we love worshiping, we love working together, we love being fellow heirs of the grace of life. And I'm making it sound like some sort of utopia or something. We're not perfect, but it's just such good people. So many good things that happen. And then for them to be willing to like pay me to be an artist in residence, which basically means like, hey, you have gifts for beautifying worship. Let's pay you to beautify our worship here at this place, you know, and the support that I get, not just as having a quarter-time job there, but in terms of the people and the congregation members that are praying for me and my work, and the choir members that know and love what I do. I'm fully known and fully loved by our staff and by our people and by our choir. And it's invigorating, both spiritually, ministerially, and even musically, to have all those good things happening at my own church. There's very little difference between what I do Monday through Saturday and then what I do on Sunday. And that hasn't always been the case for me. And I love the way that all of that has come together. I don't know if that's what you wanted me to talk about or not, but that's my love song for my church people.
Stanley, you had a question?
Yes, I of all the folks that are on this call, I'm probably the luckiest because I have a wonderful church job. I also teach at Mercy University and have the chance to work with collegiate choirs and the community choirs. And so I've gotten to do so much of your stuff, Dan, from the larger things with the orchestra and all. But I have to say that probably my favorite piece that you've written was your Lead Kindly Light, which I've been able to do a couple of times with the collegiate choirs, and it's just a fabulous work. I would love to know a bit about kind of the background that led to that. And for those who don't know that piece, it's one of his longer works. It's probably about 7 or 8 minutes, I would think. Dan, somewhere around there.
Yeah, church choirs don't get any ideas. You'd have to have a very fine church choir to pull off. That's a lot of air and high B flats. And yeah, I wrote it for Tennessee Tech. And honestly, boy, it's been almost 10 years now. I don't remember whether they sent me the text or whether I found it and proposed it to them. I'm really not sure. I'm afraid I'm going to draw a blank on the history of that. I remember writing it for Craig Zamer. I wrote it for a residency that I was doing there, and they premiered it. I think the video is on YouTube of the premiere performance there. They sang it really well. I know I remember doing some tricky, like, geek out text painting kind of things in that. I know there were some moments of text that inspired kind of unique textures or way that lines move together to picture what is it? There's like these plain chords that swirl around. I think that's what it is. Like the light keeps shining through, like on a held note that keeps staying the same. There's this other stuff that swirls and moves around, like it's darkness kind of encroaching in, but the light keeps shining through. And I'd have to go back and look to say more than that. But yeah, I'm glad you like that. Whenever people say like, "Oh, the piece of yours that I really love is," I'm like, okay, what's it going to be? You know, that I haven't heard that one in a while, so I'm encouraged by that.
Well, I find it interesting though that you just said colloquially when you said church choirs don't get any ideas, you know. But that's a good point though. You flew right through it, and that is, I can tell that you write a lot of times with the church choir in mind, and we don't get that from some other composers. They'll have a great piece that they want to put to music, and then they'll put sopranos on, like you said, B flats and everything. And not every church choir has a soprano that can sing that, or other voice parts. So
yeah, my career beautifully and providentially has just spread that gamut of working with very small church choirs that need a 2-part thing and a simple piano accompaniment. And I know what those volunteer singers with limited rehearsal time are going to struggle with in rehearsal. And so I'm trying to minimize that difficulty as much as possible. And then on the other end of the spectrum, I get to work with Voces 8 or work with really high level collegiate choirs or something. So I have to know what part of that spectrum I'm working on at any given moment. And not everything that I write is intended for that whole spectrum, a different set of parameters, certainly. My favorite thing to do, though, is try to shoot in the middle and be as wide as possible and make things work for both like collegiate choirs or more well-trained choirs and volunteer choirs, such that the strength of idea is what carries the piece, not the strength of technique required to pull it across. And sometimes a simple idea that's expressed so beautifully is the most compelling and appeals to a lot of that spectrum, not because of look what we can show off in our vocal technique, but listen to the strength of this idea and how it communicates. That's an ideal that I strive for, even though it's very hard.
Let's jump back to for a second to Keith Reeves' question, and it's essentially, how do you divide up and how do you manage your time sitting down and composing, along with your other business that you have during the week?
Yeah, it varies a lot depending on how close the deadline is, whether I've been staying up late recently or whether I've been getting to bed early. This is my studio behind me. This is my man cave, my little study at home that I get to do all my work in. Right in front of me here is a 88 key keyboard and my good monitor and my second monitor and typing keyboard. It's a good setup. I don't know if you all can hear the violin practicing that's going on behind me. I'm not sure if that's coming through at all. I was going to ask them to not do that during this. I'm not completely isolated, like those doors behind there slide open, and there's some doors over on this side too that slide open. And the beauty and challenge of working from home is that kids can come through at any minute saying, I need help with homework, or can you help me with this, or can you unlock this computer because I need to do this, or somebody needs to be taken to co-op or to track or to archery or to orchestra or to who knows what, So all that to say, I don't have a very rigid schedule. It's sort of on a what's most pressing kind of basis. It's almost like playing whack-a-mole, like whatever sticks up the highest, I'm going to beat that down and then run off to the next thing. My best work these days is usually if I get up early. That's the closest thing that I have to a regular schedule. If there's work that really needs to get done, I just try to get to bed at a good time so I can get up early before everybody else and just come in here at 5 or 5:30 or something, and have a couple hours to just be on my own and not be interrupted. During the day is when especially the farther the day goes, the harder it is to like get into that composing world and stay there. So I save the business stuff for that, running my own publishing or doing Beckenhorst things, or issues for church or whatever. That's kind of the left brain kind of stuff, which is easier to do when I'm more spent for the day. The hardest work that I do is just finding the courage to re-engage with a piece that's in process, to face the fear of not being able to find a good idea, and to try to just press a little further with that piece that day. So I try to do that earlier and then save the left brain stuff for later. You also said how much time do I average just sitting at the keyboard and composing? I probably average 45 to 60 minutes a day of really intense, like deep focus work. That's probably it. Some days I might get a couple hours, but the further I go, the weaker my ideas get and the shakier my judgment gets. And then I end up forcing kind of mediocre ideas. So I have to just back off. So, I mean, even though I joke about like playing whack-a-mole, and there's so many other things that I have to do, I think that's actually healthy for my composing. If I sat here and tried to crank out ideas for 8 hours a day, I feel like it's only the first hour or so that would be really good ideas. The other 7 would probably get worse as I went. And I'd probably be really grumpy and exhausted. So just try to keep some good balance.
Sure, wonderful. Last question, and that's from Stephen Carell. And it's essentially, how are composers and arrangers encouraged to keep producing orchestral arrangements along with the anthems?
I'm sorry, I misunderstood that.
Sure. Is there any type of encouragement for the composers and arrangers to publish an orchestral arrangement that goes along with the anthems?
So you mean orchestral? Good to see you, Steve. I saw you somewhere on here.
Let me, if I can just jump in real quick. I'm sorry for the length of the question. Oftentimes, certain compositions don't require them. Certain aspects of the anthems stand alone, simply with the piano, which is so lovely. But there are times I really appreciate the variety of offerings that can come with either a string quartet reduction, a chamber orchestra, or a full orchestra. So whenever the options are there, boy, those are exceedingly helpful for all of our participants in worship. Is there ever a conversation with the arrangers, composers, how far we can take certain compositions into offering these settings? And are those a constant conversation, or do they only happen when they accompany the submissions?
Yeah, I see what you're saying. It's the latter. It's more what that composer has envisioned for their piece. Occasionally, we will recommend something if it feels like, wow, this could really work well that way, and they didn't offer it. To be honest, there's not a lot of composers that are writing church anthems that are really, at least that we're working with, that are really gifted at writing the kind of anthems we do at Beckenhorst, and that are really gifted at orchestrating. A lot of times they're good on the vocal side or they're good on the instrumental side, but the two don't necessarily come together. They've only come together for me because of my my church background and then my degrees where I studied with more instrumental composers. And I'm so thankful for that. And I am trying to spread that wealth, to share it around and encourage and mentor other composers to do something similar. But it's a bit of a challenge for sure. And honestly, I want our instrumental things that we put out to be every bit as well crafted as the choral stuff that we put out. And so I'm pretty picky about what I'm willing to put into print and say, yeah, we believe in this and we're going to share it to everybody as, yep, this is what we a lot of times a composer will send something and I'm like, like either we're going to have to fix this or else we're just not going to go there, because it's just not well done.
Sure. And just a follow up, a lot of clearinghouse publishers, have resident orchestrators, right, ready to just churn them out. And I appreciate that about Bag and Horse, that's not, you're trying to fit an orchestration with everything that's submitted. But just was curious if there was an ongoing conversation with that, and you've answered it adequately, and I appreciate it.
Yeah, there is. I run that Nesbeck choral workshop pretty much every summer. COVID messed that up a little bit, but recently we've done some mentoring with just 2 composers at a time. We've done as many as 8 to 12, and then we had one year where we did 20. So we're trying to use the John Nesbeck Foundation to invest back into composers and build them up and give them educational opportunities more unique to the choral world than what they could find in very many other places, almost no other places. And one of the things that I'd like to do in the future, in fact, I proposed it for this summer, but we weren't ready to go that big yet, is to have a workshop for choral composers to teach them about instrumentation, where the whole thing would just be devoted to, yeah, you're a choral composer, but I mean, I get so many questions on that front, like, well, how do I do the string quartet with orchestra? And how does this instrument work? And how do you choose which instruments to? So I'm actually in the process of putting together a whole like workshop curriculum that I hope to offer to as many of our composers as can come for that. It won't be this summer. It's possible that'll be next summer. And maybe that'll yield some fruit and yield some really high quality, worthwhile instrumental or even ensemble type things that will make their way down the pipeline to you.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you so much for being with us this morning. It's just great to listen to you and try to get a little bit of a glimpse of what you do and why you write all the beautiful music that you do. We really greatly appreciate it. A few things before we leave this morning. Kyle will close us here in a minute, but I want to acknowledge and recognize a few new people that we have with us this morning. Landry Duvall at River Road Presbyterian, I think, in Richmond. Is that correct?
That's right.
Okay, great. And then Matt Newton, is he still on the call? Yes. And let's see, and also Jesse Davis. Glad to have you all here this morning with us. So, Dan, thanks again. Kyle, I hand it over to you.
All right. Yeah, just briefly, everyone, before we sign off. Dan, thank you for your contributions and continued work. The level of engagement in this meeting was significant and high. Just to let you know that we are most grateful for you and your work. And also, Doug needed to sign off. We're all busy people. And in the next 2 minutes, we'll be signing off. But I want to say, Doug wanted me to remind you that if you aren't, which I can't imagine how he meant that, because if you're got this email, got this link, then you are on the email list. But he said, check out the Polyphony website and sign up there. There's a place to sign up with your email to get future information. So I'm letting you know that.
Kyle.
Yeah.
So what he was alluding to, I passed this link on to and through some texts to some colleagues, and they joined the call and were asking, gosh, does this happen regularly? So it was a backdoor entrance to today's call. So just
okay. Thank you for that explanation, Carrie. Sorry, I was trying to wrap my head. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So to those of you that got in the back doorway today, we're glad you made it. And so you can go, I put the Polyphony website somewhere in our thread, and right above, you'll just have to scroll up a little bit, and you can sign up there. in 2 weeks, we're going to meet hymn writer Carolyn Winfrey Gillette. I've had the opportunity to visit with her over the phone in the past month, and she's just a delightful person. Some of you probably have encountered her writings before over the years. She's going to join us. Finally, a Yankee is joining the Polyphony group, it seems like. And she's a wonderful person who writes, well, as we've heard before in seminary classes, those of us in seminary classes and preaching classes, or heard from our pastors, preaching with the Bible in one hand and the newspaper in the other. Her hymn writing takes that approach, as some of you may know, addressing current events, human tragedies, disasters, just a variety of topics. So she's going to be with us in 2 weeks, and look forward to having the opportunity. And we record these sessions so we can make them available to you that way. And we'll make this one available as soon as we can. Thank you, Dan. Let's pray. Eternal God, in you we live and move and have our being. We humbly pray you so to guide and govern us by your Holy Spirit, that in all cares and occupations of our life today, we may not forget you, but may remember that we are ever walking in your sight. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Friends and beloved of God, breathe, bless, and be well.